So we're ready to put this bike together, and that's what we're going to do today. Done a few bits already. I've got the wheels built first of all. So it's the front one's behind me somewhere. I've got the cables routed, the internal cable routing. I did that first because I thought it was going to be very fiddly. Actually turned out to be a lot more straightforward than I expected. Of course, once the bike's built, you can't manipulate the frame quite as easily to get those cables in there. But we're done. Hopefully that's okay. Just collateral to that, we've got the rear caliper mounted kind of temporarily. I hope that hose is going to be long enough. Not sure about that. Another thing, just the one job that I wasn't happy doing myself, we've had the local bike shop do that this week. That's installing the bottom bracket and the headset. Two jobs really, but they're the same thing on this bike. Both of those items are press fit items. Now that means they're what's called an interference fit. So the aperture, let's say for the bottom bracket, the internal dimension of the hole is exactly the same as the external dimension of the bearing shell, and so when the shell is pressed into the hole, it's held firm by friction. Now the problem with that is you need to press those in very precisely, making sure they're going completely perpendicularly, or you risk distorting either the bearing or more catastrophically the frame. And on a carbon frame, I guess you could risk cracking the frame. Same deal with the headset. This is a semi-integrated headset which requires a cup at the top of the head tube and a cup at the bottom of the head tube. So that's the top, and the bottom one's just the same, just a little bit bigger. Now these are not bearing surfaces that you're looking at here. This is an aluminium cup that's pressed into the carbon frame, and the bearing just sits in that cup. And the bearing itself this is the top one. It's I guess it's a two-part bearing with two races separated by titanium coated stainless steel balls, and that just sits in the track. I won't drop it in because I might not be able to get it out. And there's lots of little ancillary bits as well, seals, and oh god, I hope I don't get these out of order. So what I think we'll do is we'll put the fork on first. So we need to fit those headset bearings. We're going to need a stem, which I have here. This will keep the fork on. Then we should be able to put the wheels on. So I'm going to take the fork and the lower bearing. We've got a bearing shield, which is just a little shim. We've got a crown race, which we don't need because we've already got that fitted to the fork. So we're going to stick the bearing on there. Sits nicely, and then stick the fork up through the head tube. Hopefully that's going to seat nicely in that cup at the bottom. It seems to. I'm going to drop the top one on. That sits in the top cup. It should. Oh, there it goes. And it's got a seal, a rubber seal on there. Put the cap on. Okay, it's a very snug fit. I suppose that's the cap to keep everything, all the crap out. What we can do now is we can just put the stem on temporarily. We'll have a stack of spacers on here eventually, but we can't really do this properly until the thing's sitting on its wheels. There's a lot of rocking on that at the moment because it's not really in. We're looking more and more like a bike. Not sure what bars we're going to put on here yet. I've got a good selection. I think I'll probably end up putting those white riser bars off the Boardman on there. They're going to look a bit odd. It's going to look like a bit of a patchwork quilt. I mean, ultimately I might put the Jones loop bars on there. That's going to look very weird on an enduro mountain bike, but not too bothered about that. You know, those are very ergonomic bars. Or in the meantime, we could use the Surly Moloko bars. These are steel, so they're kind of on the heavy side. They might look pretty good. I mean, they're ergonomic. That's why I bought them, not for how they look. Yeah, I think we might use those. Alright, so we've got that rear wheel on. Looks pretty darn cool. I was given to understand this frame requires a minimum 180mm rear rotor, so that's what I fitted. But actually, and I assumed that meant that you didn't need a post mount adapter to mount the disc, but that doesn't seem to be the case, that the caliper's too close and was in the way. Now, what does that mean? Well, it probably means I could put an adapter on there. I'm presuming you can use a post mount adapter like on the front brake, which I have one of for the fork. But alternatively, it probably means I could use a 160 rotor on the back, which is fine. Actually, that'll work out well because I've got a 160 Ice Tech rotor that I bought for the Boardman. It's currently on the Boardman's back wheel. I could just take that off, put that on instead, and then I'll have an Ice Tech rotor for the front, which is a bonus, which I hadn't planned for. Let's try and put the front wheel on as well, just for laughs. Let's see how it looks. Alright, there it is. So there it is with both wheels on. It's almost a bike. Once again, I was reading the wrong spec sheet. The Mark 6 version 3 needs a 180 rotor on the back as a minimum. This one can take a 160, and indeed it's sized for a 160, which is why the 180 wasn't going to fit without an adapter. Alright, cranks next. Should be fairly straightforward. Got the BB in already. That's the non-drive side. There's the drive side crank with the chain wheel attached. 32 tooth. Did think about upgrading to a 34 tooth before I installed, but we haven't done that. We're going to take it as it comes. Relatively low geared, but we'll make do with that for now. What's this little? Two little washers here. They look like the right size exactly to go in between the pedal and the crank. We can't really assume that. We'll have to go and read the manual. So I guess all we have to do is slide this in. It's already greased up. Let's see. Okay, I've consulted the documentation for installing this crank set, and as it appears there's really nothing much to it. It's a single Allen bolt. Tighten that up to the appropriate torque. The question of spacers now, okay, we've got as usual nothing's as straightforward as you think. This is a SRAM DUB press fit bottom bracket. The shell width is 92mm, comes with spacers. The nuke proof Horizon manual says that on a 92mm shell we want two 2mm spacers as opposed to 3, which we'd need 3 for the 89.6mm shell. Now the problem with that is it's in disagreement with the SRAM documentation, which says we need a spacer. It seems to be saying 2mm spacer, which is half what the nuke proof recommendation is. And just to make things even more complicated or confusing, these nuke-proof spacers, if you measure them, they're not actually 2mm, they're about 1.5 mm. So I think what we're going to do is go with the nuke-proof documentation, since that seems more specific than the SRAM standard. So we're going to go with 2 spacers, and if that's wrong and we figure out later on that it's wrong, we can always take them off, or take one off. Just put one there. Oh, and also in the SRAM documentation it does indeed confirm these 2 washers are for the pedals. Okay, so then this guy, I'm gonna slot on here. Now, is this keyed? I don't think that's keyed, so we could get that one skewed. Just going to check that's all the way in actually. Okay, first of all the preloader is all the way out. Second of all, it seems to be all the way in. Alright, there we go, so we're screwing that on. So we go to 54 Newton meters, which is a heck of a lot. I need a torque wrench for that. Alright, so what we should find now is we've still got some play in there, which we do indeed, and we have a preload adjuster on the other side. That spins good. I think that's about the right balance. So I need to tighten up that preload adjuster lock ring. Try and get at it. Well, that was a faff, but we've got that on. We've got the crank spinning freely now. There's no play in that. So next we've got to put the derailleur on. Hoo-hoo. Okay, so we've got the derailleur on. We've adjusted the lower limit screw approximately. Next thing to do is we've got to put the shifter on and then attach the cable. And of course, to do that we've got to make sure we've got enough slack in the cable, because it goes underneath the shock linkage. To do that we're going to have to probably let all the air out of the shock. Right, so I'm just doing the shift cable. We've got the shifter on here, and we've got the inner cable routed, got the suspension compressed pretty much to full compression. That makes sure we've got enough slack in the cable. The cable run. I'm just going to put the inner cable in now. Try not to kink it. Oh, there we are. Alright, shifter's on, cable's in, and we're shifting. Need to put the chain on before we can finish that off. Okay, we're getting there, chain's on, derailleur's on, and we're set up, and we're shifting end to end. All good, got the pedals on, got DMR Volt magnesium pedals on here, not because I particularly wanted magnesium, but that's what was going on eBay. pretty much getting close to riding. Just got to put the brakes on and then I've got to set up the shocks. Alright, we've got the back brake successfully reinstated, and happy to say that's plenty long enough. Just went straight on, didn't even have to re-bleed. Just got to get the front brake on now. Hopefully this is going to be plenty long enough as well. So there it is, the hybrid hell-spawned trail bike. Everything's good to go, so there's only one thing left to do.